saying a recession's even more likely than ever.
Not the majority of them aren't saying that. Come on, don't make things up, okay? Now you sound like a Republican politician. I'm joking. That was a joke.
So, Kilian, we just watched that clip of Biden on the beach in Rehoboth, and you got the reporter there asking him about a recession. I think that's a pretty normal question to ask a president, who handles a lot of stuff that has to do with the American economy. And he snaps at him there, and he says, "Now you sound like a Republican asking this kind of question." That was kind of weird. Do you think we're really headed towards a recession here?
Well, let me start off by saying that, most Americans right now and economists sound like Republican politicians, if that's his metric. I mean, even Bill Clinton, Treasury Secretary Larry Summers thinks that we're headed for a recession right now. So this isn't some Republican talking point. This is a widespread belief right now across the United States. And it's one that's probably not far off. All the indicators are pointing that way.
Mm-hmm. What are those kind of indicators? I know that what I was taught in economics class in college and even in high school, that a recession is when you have 2 quarters, right, of negative GDP growth. That's kind of like the baseline that we look at here. What are some other indicators? I know, the president has talked about how, the economy is doing fine right now. Oh my gosh, we have all these, businesses reopening that were forced to close during the COVID pandemic. But at the same time, we have record inflation. We're actually seeing fewer people. Job growth is slowing. What are some other indicators here that could show that we might be headed towards a recession?
Yeah, well, you have some historical indicators that are trending that way, such as skyrocketing energy prices on oil and gas, or flattening yield curves, which measure the spread of government bond yields. That's kind of wonky. One of the easier indicators that we see is the Federal Reserve raising interest rates right now. So the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate of controlling inflation and maximizing maximizing employment in the United States. So they have to kind of balance these two. And right now, inflation's out of control. So with the tools that the Federal Reserve has, and those are open market operations, the buying and selling of government bonds. It's how they pump money into the economy. Setting reserve requirements, which is how much fiscal assets that the Federal Reserve has to have on hand, how much liquid cash they need to have on hand. And setting interest rates. These 3 tools are how the Federal Reserve manages the monetary system, manages the money supply. And right now they're tightening up. So by raising the interest rates, which would be the federal fund rates, it restricts the ability of banks to loan each other money, to give themselves more capital to inject into the economy. So by raising these interest rates to try and quell inflation and cool down the economy here, they are, in a sense, spurring us towards recession. If they raise it too high, during the last time we had inflation this high 40 years ago, Paul Volcker was the head of the Federal Reserve, appointed by Jimmy Carter. We had interest rates up to 20%. Right now, we're looking at 1.5%, 1.75 is where it's at right now, 20. And that launched us into a recession in the early 1980s. And that kind of plays into the hubris of what a central bank is, having these central planners think that they can manage the world's largest economy.
And it seems like time and time again, it's a very, very fine line to walk there, where you don't want to raise interest rates too much. It seems like if they even do a little bit here, there's a good chance we're going to end up with a recession, even though they're trying to steer the economy back on the right track. So you talked about central planners there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real tight line they have to walk. They need to do it enough to help stop or curb inflation here, but they can't do it too much to plunge us into a recession. So Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, is threading a really tight needle right now. And there's a reason that probably 4 out of 5 economists right now believe that we're headed for a recession. And that spells trouble for the Biden administration right now.
And who was it? Summers from the the Obama administration?
Clinton administration, Larry Summers.
Clinton administration. There we go back. Better. Even saying that we're probably headed towards a recession here, but obviously Federal Reserve, that's monetary policy. So that's only kind of part of the equation when it comes to, the health of the economy overall, but also when it comes to actual inflation. And the other part that has contributed, obviously, to inflation here is the wild spending policies, the fiscal policies from the Biden administration with these, the COVID bill they passed, the infrastructure package, and they wanted to pass the even bigger, the Build Back Broke bill that thankfully didn't get passed, but would have made inflation even worse. If we're heading towards a recession, what do you think Democrats would actually try to do? What would Biden and House and Senate Democrats actually try to do to take off the burden on the American people here? If their only tool, it seems, in terms of fiscal policy is really just to spend more money, and we see where that's gotten us.
Yeah, well, I hate to give him any more credit than I already have. I hate to give him any credit in general, but Larry Summers also has a Washington Post op-ed. Heck, I hate giving them credit too, claiming that the American Rescue Plan would be a death knell for Democrats and that would spur inflation. So he's been on top of this. Everybody that has been watching the state of play in Washington could see this coming from a mile away with the trillions of dollars we've pumped into the economy. And that's really the state of play in Washington. It is spend more money. So what is their reflex going to be here? I can almost guarantee that the Biden administration is going to want to spend more money, have another round of stimulus if we get into a recession, which is only going to spur the fires of inflation that has caused so much heartache and so much problems in America right now. I mean, people are paying $6-7 a gallon, depending on where you are in the country. It's really brutal out there. And the methods of just pumping money into the economy, spending money we don't have, has proven to not work, but that's the only thing in their playbook right now, in the progressive playbook. They used to borrow money when they didn't have it. Now they just print it.
With all these massive spending packages and Dems deciding if we do hit a recession, they're probably going to push for more stimulus packages, which is, bad for inflation again. Do you think maybe we're on the verge of another, fiscal reckoning, kind of something like we saw in the early days of the Tea Party movement, where you actually had a lot of people really concerned about the national debt? That was a really big issue driving people to the polls, and it ushered in a whole new, class of Republicans who actually, did make some spending cuts during the Obama years. Do you think that maybe people are going to realize that, the national debt really is a problem? Obviously, that's something we've always focused on here at FreedomWorks. We've always kept the drumbeat up on that. Even, under Trump, when him and, House Republicans would pass like these ridiculous budgets, we were always the ones out here saying, you can't do that. It's bad for national debt, bad for inflation. Do you think people are going to kind of realize it maybe this time around after we're seeing such rampant inflation?
Yeah, well, they absolutely have to. Republicans have to stand up for some sort of fiscal conservatism that, frankly, they haven't in about a decade now, since they originally came out with the Tea Party in 2010. I mean, yeah, we got some great reforms. We got spending caps. We were able to strip earmarks or ban earmarks, the currency of corruption, as they're known, from the budgeting vehicles in Washington. But you know what? Those are back. We're back to where we started. We've got deficits way bigger, far larger than at any point they were during the Obama administration. We are spending more money than we've ever had. Yeah.
You remember what Biden said earlier this year? He's talking about his, I'm the one who reduced the deficit for the first time in years, which is like, yeah, you're right about that. But it's like if one day you go out to dinner and you spend $100 and the next time you go out to dinner you spend $99, that's kind of what we're talking about here in terms of deficit, lowering the deficit. It's not bad, because even if we'd passed Build Back Better, he couldn't say that, and he was pushing for that to be passed the whole time. So it's really just disingenuous argument, I think, coming from the Biden White House, and it shows they really have no idea what to do about this, because their economic policy has completely failed.
Yeah, it's the definition of hypocrisy, really. Look, yeah, you were able to cut a $3 trillion deficit. Good on you. I'm glad that we're not spending $3 trillion more than we have right now. But you know what? The deficit we have is less than it was it's greater than it was in 2019 before the COVID pandemic. So we're not even back to where we were pre-COVID. And you're going to spike the football here after you failed to get your giant $6 trillion Build Back Better package passed through the halls of Congress. It is smacks of hypocrisy. And could you imagine how worse inflation would be right now if that bill had passed?
Yeah,
different
people
universe.
Across the board are saying that. It's not just Republicans saying this. It's a pretty acceptable thing. It's accepted by, economists that would have driven inflation even further if we'd passed Build Back Better. But, Biden would have loved to have taken credit for that. But now he's throwing out this dumb idea that, he's some champion of reducing the deficit, which we know is, completely false. But so I want to talk about this. We're looking at this article earlier, Kilian, about way back in 2008. You have Obama's Energy Secretary Chu. He said something about you need $6 per gallon gas to really start changing people's behavior. Now, that's something I think that they're pushing for with this kind of Green New Deal-esque agenda that Dems are pushing today to take away our reliance on fossil fuels and, everything's going to be run by windmills and solar panels. Just, forget about nuclear. Hypocrisy there, talking about $6 gas. That's maybe one of the most tone-deaf kind of things I've heard from a government official, and we're looking back here at 2008 even.
And they haven't changed their tone at all either. Look at Debbie Stabenow, the senator from Michigan, talking about how gas prices didn't matter to her because she drove from her home to Washington D.C. in her Tesla. So she passed by as many Exxons as she could, and it didn't matter because she got a $60,000 basically sports car. Good for her. It is tone deaf. It is totally devoid of reality, especially coming from somebody like Stabenow, who is a senator of Michigan, which is the car capital of the United States. I'm sure Ford and GM are feeling great about skyrocketing gas prices right now. It is totally ivory tower type mentality towards the pain that Americans are feeling right now at the pump. At some level, I mean, they're happy that gas prices are high.
Sure. And, I would almost respect them a little bit more if they just admitted that this is trying to change people's behavior, trying to transition us away from, fossil fuels or something like that. If they just kind of admitted it. But the fact that they're talking about the gas prices are high due to Vladimir Putin or whatever you want to say, that's kind of ridiculous to be saying when there's actually another kind of ulterior motive here where they're trying to they don't really care about the average American paying high prices so long as we transition there. Any thoughts on that?
Look, they're just trying to deflect blame. They want the end result of going to this renewable energy idea. That's always been their goal. That's always been their idea. They don't care how they get there. But
which we know isn't really renewable in the end.
No, it's not renewable. Yeah. I mean, you're pumping your Tesla full of coal. But anyway, they don't want to have any of the flack for it. They're infuriated that they're getting hit for it. This goes back to the Biden quote you had at the beginning of that video, that you sound like a Republican when you criticize him. I mean, that's why we went from inflation doesn't exist to it's transitory to it's Putin's fault. It's a good thing. It is wild. It's absolutely wild. It's price gouging now by oil companies. It is a ridiculous inability to take blame or have any of the consequences for your own actions.
Sure. And this is also obviously trying to change people's behavior. But one kind of parallel that I noticed, and I've talked to other people about, kind of going back to the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, when a lot of these whether the restrictions or, anything like that, these were all things that they tried to do to change people's behavior. And we've seen how that panned out. People don't listen to these restrictions. They want to go out and, live their lives. They want to, take risk into their own hands because, surprise, they're individual Americans. We've never been a risk-averse, society here. Obviously, we're going to look out for people who, are at risk. But the idea that you're trying to switch people's behavior through government policy, that's kind of similar to what they're trying to do with these green policies too. I don't think it's going to actually work out.
Yeah, well, we started off this interview talking about the Federal Reserve and their mindset that they can manipulate and control the United States economy. Central planning has always been a fallacy. The idea that people up in Washington can engineer the perfect society is ludicrous. It is detached from reality, and it doesn't understand that people are individuals and that we act as we do for our families and for our friends, not to serve some government apparatus.
Sure. And I mean, I think what ends up happening is the American people end up footing the bill in the end for these kind of policies. Yeah,
they absolutely do.
Kilian, thanks for coming on. Always great to talk with you.